Alright, apparently Facebook's going to be a pain in the ass today, so we're going to have to start this over because I don't like partial videos. They're too much of a pain in the ass to transfer over. So, Chapter 10, Once Lost. The crude boat... The crude boat guided gently along the top of the murky green water. Crennan plunged the pole into the soft bottom, pushing himself further along, his eyes searching the surrounding forest. He couldn't shake the feeling he was being watched, though he hadn't seen any sign of company. Hoping it remained that way, he pressed again, feeling the boat lunge forward each time. He wasn't sure if his sash would save him if the Alfar mistook him for one of the hardy people of the north. He couldn't recall how long he'd been gone. Time stood still in the arena, though the seasons had changed since he'd last been in the wondrous forest of Evanwood. It remained beautiful, but there was an unsettling dreariness he couldn't shake. It was as if the trees were less inviting than he remembered from his last visit. Ahead, a large tree blocking the wide waterway. Ahead, a large tree had fallen, blocking the wide waterway. Several smaller limbs had collected against it, forming a barrier across the surface. Guiding his boat to shore, Crennan stepped onto land for the first time since he'd found the river. He'd traveled for nearly 3 days following the shore before he had found the landing. Had it not been for word of his victory against the Dragonkin, he had no doubt the orcs would have parted ways with the small punt. As it were, reputation and coin opened more doors than he could ever know. For the first time, as far as he knew, a half-orc was revered among their kind, and the name of him just happened to be his own. Pulling the wooden device onto shore, he searched for an area to cross. The thick tree, even in its current state, had to have been at least 40 foot tall, and there was no telling how much of it was buried in the dirt. Glancing at the debris, it appeared to have recently fallen. He didn't recall any such blockage when the orcs brought him this route, gods knew how long ago. The dirt around the impact site hadn't sprouted grass yet. He couldn't help but feel it was an intentional dam. The tree appeared strong, aside from the areas where the bark had been ripped away during its fall, as if someone simply cut it down to block the river pass, greatly delaying travel and offering several ambush points along the way. Of course, he was no expert on trees, or anything else for that matter. There just seemed to be something fabricated about it. It all seemed too intentional, too planned. Sighing heavily, Crennan pressed his foot against the flat rim of the boat, stepping down hard. The curved bottom edge rolled up, lifting the square-shaped nose into the air. Crennan grabbed the ropes run along the sides and pushed his arms through them, slinging the small pun onto his back like a shell. Securing the pole, he pressed it into the ground and made his way inland, hoping to find a place to cross. He walked for what felt like hours, unable to find the slightest low point. He considered climbing over it, but he'd spend more time cutting footholds than it'd take him to reach the end. This had to be the largest tree this forest had to offer, and he hadn't even found the limbs yet. Abandoning his search, he spun around, searching the dense woodland. "I know you're here, somewhere. I'm Crennan of Marabane, ally to your people, and I ask for help. Show me where to cross." A smooth, elegant voice echoed from the trees. It had a familiar tone to it, but he couldn't place where he'd heard it before. They all kind of sounded and looked the same to him. "All you had to do was ask. We would have gladly shown you the path, hours ago. After all, maintaining our allegiance with the Order is of the utmost importance. Now so more than ever. Even if it's to help the half-breeds such as you." The tone shifted to distaste toward the end. Crennan watched a band of Alfar step into view. He didn't recognize the face, but the armor danced into his memory. This was the Alfar that met him and Malachi. The black leather scales weren't as easy. The black leather scales weren't an easy detail to forget. "So you show me the way across?" Jackless smiled. "Not exactly. Your build is incapable of keeping up with us, and I don't have the time to wait for you." "But you have time to watch me for hours?" Crennan asked. "Details." The Merkafar captain dismissively waved the words away, continuing on. "Your friend Ravion has made quite the name for himself, and in doing so has strengthened our borders. Your border wardens have expanded their territory and forced the orc pigs into our trap." Excuse me. Forced the orc pigs into our trap. The few that have escaped have traveled east into the wilds of Vel. For the first time since the orc wars ended, our borders are secure on the south face, and your friend had single-handedly been responsible for that. That alone is why I'm going to help you. So Ravion secured the borders? Good for him. Glad he doing something in my absence. Krenin smiled, feeling his lips stretch around his small tusk. He watched the Alfar captain nod to one of the others. He was dressed differently, less armored and seemed unarmed. That was a strange concept, though he'd seen such ignorance before. The Alfar chanted some weird words, and an orange glow wrapped around him. It expanded, swallowing the half-orc. Krenin felt his stomach churn as if his insides were being twisted. The forest disappeared from sight and was replaced by an open field on the outskirts of a fairly large city. He recognized it at once. This was Fender's Spear, though it wasn't as run down as it had been the last time he had visited. The buildings were patched and clean. The wood planks along the siding had been secured or replaced. For the first time in as long as he would recall, the city appeared clean. The broken wagons were gone, actual shops and vendor stands in their place. This was a city to be proud of. Go to the Civil Hall. You'll find Ravion there. The Alfar disappeared in the same orange glow. Ink rolled off the tip of the feathered quill, soaking into the rough parchment. A single candle rested in the holder, dimly lighting the newly constructed room. The walls were made of polished cherry and were lined with shelves of books, stands, and tapestries. It was a bit more extravagant than it needed, but the architect insisted. A heavy knock echoed from the other side of the door. Ravion flipped the pages, shuffling several overs on top of them. Resting the quill in its silver holder, he interlocked his fingers, resting his elbows on the desk. Enter. The door creaked open, revealing a skinny man clad in the silver and blue emblem of Shadgull. He stepped into the room. Lord Ravion, I bring word from Lord Eric Deleon of Shadgull. He seeks audience with the Lords of Delmora, in regard to his father's murder. Ravion stood, approaching the messenger. When does he desire this audience? The next full moon, my lord, in 2 weeks' time. Ravion stopped in front of the man. Please inform your master of my deepest condolences. The news of Remley's passing was unfortunate. He was a good man whom I held the highest respect for. Sadly, I will not be able to attend. Pressing matters of state have occupied my time of late, and I'll be unavailable at the time of your lord's gathering. Perhaps I can meet with him when I pass through Shadgull in the next few days. Otherwise, it'll have to wait until I return. The messenger nodded, taking a step back. Understood, my lord. I shall inform him of your reply upon my return. He paused, leaving an uncomfortable silence in the dimly lit room. Finding his words, he continued. My master also wishes to extend his condolences to you in regard to the loss of your friend Malachi. He offered to host a grand celebration in his honor, if you so desired. Additionally, it seems Master Gareth and Master Kane have both vanished without a trace. My lord was wondering if you had heard from them. Their absence has been noticed. Ravion shook his head. No, thank you. That won't be necessary. Malachi's loss is regrettable, though his memory will live on. As for Gareth, no, sadly, I have not. I haven't seen him since the Drew War, and it's been over a year now. I question his fate, but the old cuss is too damn stubborn to die. Ravion chuckled, silently hoping his friend was okay. Kane, on the other hand, had some business up north. That's part of what keeps me from joining Eric. Thank you, my lord. I'll be sure to inform my master of this knowledge. I wish you good fortune in your endeavors. Ravion nodded. Thank you, messenger. Be sure to replenish your rations and seek lodging for the evening. You may return to your master in the morning. He extended his fist, dropping a handful of silver into the man's hand. The messenger bowed and backed out of the room, refusing to turn his back until he was out of sight. Waiting for the door to latch, Ravion returned to his desk and uncovered his documents. Quickly finishing the missive, he rolled the parchment and blobbed the sealing wax over the edge. Firmly pressing his stamp into the cooling puddle, he waited, letting it harden. Removing the tool, he inspected the seal, ensuring the raven perched atop the wolf's head was clearly visible. Tucking the scroll into his vest, he turned to leave. Reaching the door, he heard another knock. Pulling the ornate wood barrier toward him, he stared at the half-orc waiting on the other side. Krenin, my friend, I'm happy to see you. We were worried something had happened to you. Placing his hand on the half-orc's shoulder, he invited him in. I was just getting ready to leave, but I have I can spare a few moments for returning friends. Seems much changed since I left. Crinan stepped into the room looking for a chair large enough for his frame. Not seeing one, he parted his feet enough to stand comfortably. Much indeed, though not all has been good. We lost Malachi in the Drew War, but his death was not in vain. He ensured my survival and toppled a Drew city in the process. Crinan stared at the perfectly seated floorboards. The news cut him deeper than any blade could. Malachi was a good friend and brother. I'll miss him. As will I, my friend, as will I. I wish I had time to hear all about your endeavors, but unfortunately I'm running a bit behind schedule. I would have a task from you if you're so inclined. What do you need? I have a caravan leaving from Arbane in the morning. Would you do me the favor of ensuring it arrives unmolested? There's a fair amount of information contained in the cargo that I can't risk falling into the wrong hands, and I'd feel much better about it if you were to accompany it. If it means I don't have to walk home. Crinan gave a toothy smile. I don't foresee that being a problem. If all goes according to plan, it'll be there within a week. I'll bring you up to date on everything when I arrive. Feel free to make yourself at home. I unfortunately have to run. Travel well. See you in a week. Crinan extended his hand, filling the half-orc... Ravion extended his hand, filling the half-orc, lock his meaty palm around his forearm. Pulling him close, they exchanged a brotherly hug and parted. I'm glad you're home. Ravion spun around and headed out the door. The golden fields danced in the evening air. Ravion could see the forested mountains in the distance. Ensuring he wasn't followed, he darted across the open and took cover in the rocky outcropping. Studying the rocks, he found the hidden trail. Quickly navigating the narrow ridge, he stepped out onto the overlook. He could see the spires of the reconstructed keep towering over the sparse trees and jutting stone. Had he not known what to look for, they would have blended in with their surroundings perfectly. The moon reached its peak height, beaming a glowing white onto the outstretched ledge. He watched it inch ever closer to its mark, reflecting off the glossy finish of the stone. The individual beams launched from one to the next, encompassing him. Moving into position, a single beam focused light and shot forth, illuminating the darkened ravine. The reflected moonlight burned bright, revealing the correct path, as if it were the only possible option in the maze of trails. At a near run, careful to reach the ground before the light had faded, Ravion stepped onto the grassy landscape, amazed at the elegance of the sight before him. The huge fortress ground stood radiantly in the moonlight, just outside of an equally large cavern. Ravion approached, making sure he was clearly visible. There was little worry they'd mistake him for an intruder, but there was no sense in taking unneeded risk. Seeing him approach, the Maldaran guards snapped to attention. Silently awaiting him, they offered salute and returned to their ease once he had passed. Ravion nodded, acknowledging each one. They were loyal to Sonaria. That alone meant they had his respect. Marching toward the entrance with purpose, he stepped into the courtyard. Several stone runs were lined with food of various colors and shapes. It was unlikely to sustain their full number, but it would at least supplement them until the fields could grow to fruition. Making his way along the stone walkway, Ravion watched the heavy reinforced wooden doors swing open. There was no denying they'd done wonders for this place. Nearly all of the rotten wood had been replaced, and the moss had been scraped from the stone. Even the damaged walls had been restacked and mortared into position. This keep may as well have been a different construct from the last time he had seen it. He stepped through the doors, remembering the face of each guard he passed. Entering the common room, he turned and marched toward the stairway running beside the grand hall. He was not here for ceremony. There was no sense in taking the long way round. Cresting the top, he followed the balcony around and came to another, smaller set of stairs. A guard stood posted on each side of the closed door. Is she in? Yes, my lord. She is expecting you. Ravion pulled the brass ring, opening the decorated barrier. Stepping inside, he closed it behind him and smiled at the figure across the room. Sonaria stared out the large open window overlooking the courtyard ground and the cavern beyond. Ravion walked past the polished table, running the length of the room. Its chairs were pushed in neatly, showing no one had used it recently. The room was empty and barren, save for the table in the center and the pair of them. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, laying his chin on her shoulder. "Have I told you I missed you?" "Every time we're apart." She reached up, gently touching his cheek. She threw her arms over his neck and passionately kissed his lips. Pulling back, she stared into his eyes, feeling lost in their pensive gaze. "I'm glad you've come. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten all about me," she joked, keeping her arms wrapped around him. "Never. Nothing in this realm, nor any other, could ever make me forget about you." Foreshadowing. "Hey, Sam. Glad you could tune in." "There'd better not be. I'd hate to have marched to the end of her just to find you." She smiled, kissing him lightly. "I have a gift for you." "Oh?" Ravion released her and took a step back. "It seems great minds think alike. I also come bearing gift." "Really? Well, you first." Ravion reached beneath his vest and retrieved the red leather tube. Handing it to her, he waited for her to remove the end and the parchment within. "This is the deed to the keep, and 1,000 acres the 1,000 acres it rests upon has been put in your name. You're officially a landowner." She read over the stacked parchment, reviewing each one as if it was the key to her future. Rolling it up and tucking it back into the tube, she threw her arms around him, hugging tight. "Thank you. I can't begin to explain what this means for us." Kissing him deeply, she looked up, smiling. "Are you ready for my gift?" He couldn't help but find comfort in her expression. Her every action brought him joy. "Is it a turnip? You know how much I love turnips." She chuckled. "No, silly, it's not a turnip. You hate them." She marched past him. Just a little insight there. The whole turnip joke that has appeared in, I believe it's appeared in all 3 books. Ravion hates turnips, not necessarily that he actually hates them, but in my D&D group we have a character who will appear in the Elderlands books later on, named Finlara, who has a almost scary relationship with turnips. I don't think relationship's the right word, but she reveres them greatly. And that was a subtle nod to her with Ravion's dislike of turnips. So, little fun fact there. But she marched past him to the head of the table, guiding him by his arm. Reaching beneath the thick wooden top, she pulled a hidden lever. The table clicked and a drawer popped out as if out of the perfectly matched wood grain. She pulled the compartment open and reached in, grabbing a dirty, blood-stained leather satchel. Handing it to him, she waited for him to inspect it. Ravion glanced over the bag. It was caked in mud, showing it hadn't been opened recently. Where the mud wasn't pressed into the seams, you could see a mixture of black and red. "Ah, beautiful. You shouldn't have. It's even my favorite color." He smiled, taunting her. "Very funny, asshole. Open it." Ravion found a wooden clevis. Flipping the button through the slit, he pulled the flap open and looked inside. A shimmering black book rested in the bag, unnaturally clean despite the filth of its outside. He pulled it free, inspecting the exterior. Not so much as a speck of dirt clung to the radiating cover or pressed yellow pages. "We've broken through the collapse of the cavern and found the catacomb deeps. My scouts encountered a few Drew patrols, but it was nothing they couldn't handle. It seems their lines have been broken. For the time being, they're unorganized and without command. I don't know how long it's going to last, but we're doing everything we can to keep them that way. This book was found by one of these patrols." "What's in it?" Ravion couldn't help but feel like she was keeping something from him. The thought took him back to their first meeting when they didn't trust each other. Opening the book, he glanced at the flaky, aged pages within. To his surprise, they were completely blank. "I don't know. It's only part of your gift. Perhaps the second part can shed some light on the subject." Scenaria let out a sharp whistle. Ravion heard several footsteps echo off the stone and wood floors, making their way down the hallway. One of the side doors opened, revealing a group of Maldaran scouts. Ravion couldn't recall ever meeting this particular unit. The soldiers escorted a bound man into the room. He was broad, but the tattered rags clothing him were much too big. He had a brown woolen bag over his head, and judging by the way it covered his face, he was more than likely gagged as well. Despite the loss of weight and the obvious physical changes, the red glow was all too familiar. "Gareth?" The soldiers brought him to a stop and pulled the bag from over his head, revealing the scar running down the right side of his face. The damaged eye socket was sunken, but the wound had healed. They untied his bindings, letting him carry his own weight. Ragnar leaned over the man. As promised, you are free men now. Gareth squinted against the overwhelming light. He'd been in darkness for so long that his eye had trouble adjusting. A muffled voice echoed across the room, too disoriented to make out. He felt the comfort of the room, but he felt a comfort in the room that he hadn't expected. He wasn't sure if it was his impending freedom or something else, but for the first time in months, he no longer felt at ease. For the first time in months, maybe longer, he felt at ease. Gareth, what the hell happened to you? Ravion ran over, inspecting his friend and brother. Ravion? Gareth questioned aloud. I'll be damned, they were telling the truth. Guess that means I don't have to kill them all now. Cennaria approached, laying her hand on Ravion's shoulder. She was careful to keep her love between herself and the wild Drew Slayer. There was no telling what he was capable of, and she didn't want to risk him lashing out. He's still got some fight in him. When my men found him, he took out nearly 30 before he collapsed without a scratch. I don't know what he is, but he's got some kind of power I've never seen before. The satchel was in his possession. If I had to guess, I'd say he has some answers. Ravion was lost in the sight of his friend. He was near a completely different person. Yet that vibrant personality still burned bright as ever behind the single, unhindered eye. He spun around and kissed her as deeply as he could. You've returned my brother. I'm eternally in your debt. Cennaria smiled. You don't owe me anything. I love you. I just want your happiness. Nothing more. Ravion returned his focus to Gareth. I don't know what you've been through, or if you'll even believe what I have to say. We both know what tricks the Drew can play on your mind, but I promise you this is real. These people are my friends, and I hope you can find the truth in that. He pressed a round token into Gareth's hand. Gareth closed his hand around the badge, feeling the engraved surface, forming a raised trident. Bringing it to his face, he focused, letting his sight adjust on the sigil. Looking over the badge, unique among its kind, he studied the markings, recognizing it as Ravion's. His gaze shifted back to the Dollar Eye Scout. I believe you. Grabbing hold of the smaller man, Gareth pulled him tight. And that is the end of the book. We'll do, like I say, the first time I tried to record this before it kind of got messed up. I will be at Tricon in Evansville, Indiana next week. Which means that I'll be on the road Sunday and will not be able to do the live reading. So we'll have to do Chapter 11 the following weekend. On that same note, Tricon, hell yeah. There was some excitement there, more than you guys usually get. Tricon's going to be awesome. Evansville, Indiana. I'll be getting there Thursday evening, and it'll be a hell of a time, and then I'll return sometime Sunday. It'll probably be after dark Sunday when I get back. So, if you're in the area, able to stop by, you're going to have a blast. If you're not able to, sucks, but, all of my books are still available online, so if you can't see me personally, you can get them then. Doing the official release for Order of the Trident Exodus there, which completes the Order of the Trident trilogy. Not to say that the Elderland storyline is done, because there's still a lot more books that I'm going to do in that. Even in just the original plan, there were 7 books planned, the Order of the Trident being 1 book. So if all of the others expand the way the Order of the Trident did, we're probably looking at a 14, 15 book series as of right now. That's not including any spin-offs or additions that I may throw in there, which, honestly, they're already in my head. So, I'll keep writing if you guys keep reading. That's about the best I can promise. I'm sure I'll keep writing even if you guys aren't reading. Once you kind of start on this path, it's hard to stop, so. That's about all I've got for now. I'll get this video, and I don't believe I posted last week's to YouTube, but I will be doing that pretty soon. Have fun. Here pretty soon I'm going to try to start a campaign where I start talking about other local talent, artists, painters, musicians, authors. You name it. It's more than just me out there. There's a lot of us, and we all kind of have to support each other. But anyway, that's all I've got. So you guys have a good Sunday, and we will talk to you later. Bye.